Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wellness Wednesday. If you are just stumbling on my page, my name is Donna. I am a mom, a nana, a girlfriend, a wellness advocate. I am studying for my Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling. I am also a jazzercise yoga, line dancing, running fanatic. When you see me in the morning, usually I'm either just finishing up or getting ready to start some type of workout. Today is going to be yoga and line dancing at home because I love it, and I'm tired of forgetting my favorite dances. So I've started doing it at home because I can't find classes that align with my schedule. In any case, if you are local to me, we are currently under a tornado watch. Not that you would know by looking outside. Good morning, Danielle. But if you are under a tornado watch and expecting extreme weather today, wherever you are, I hope that you are safe. And if you see me look a little distracted, one of the things that makes me happiest in the morning is seeing the hummingbirds on the feeder outside my window, which I have one now. They are just amazing little creatures. Okay, so that's enough about me. If you are just stumbling on my page, you may not have seen any of my videos before. But I started Wellness Wednesday due to a lifelong journey with anxiety and depression, known as functional anxiety and depression, to the point where at one point in time, I thought it was just part of my personality and that I was wired differently than everybody else. When the truth of it was that with a lot of work, I was able to change my wiring, if you will, a little bit, because our brains are uniquely plastic. And it has changed my life. So I like to share. I find that I learn best by getting tips from others, and by sharing tips with others. So that is why I started Wellness Wednesday, so we could have conversations about wellness and share tips with each other about how to make our lives just more well. Good morning, Miss Danielle, if I didn't already say that. So last week, because it's Mental Health Awareness Month, and last week was Tardive Dyskinesia Awareness Week, we discussed the importance of awareness, and why it's a thing and what is behind these awareness months, weeks, etc. If you didn't see it, let me know. I'll be happy to drop the link in the comments or tag you in it. Or if you just go to the videos on my Facebook page and scroll, you will find all of the things, because this is episode number 83, which I just can't believe. We're closing in about a year and a half now. And it's super exciting, and I appreciate you if you are watching on a regular basis or even just once. I absolutely appreciate you. In any case, advocacy has been huge in my studies this term. It's actually been a pretty good theme all the way through my graduate studies so far. I know, Carla. Good morning. 83. It's unbelievable. And also advocacy is big on a personal level for me, just recently having reared its head again because someone close to me is needing to do some self-advocacy. So anyway, it seems like a great topic, especially during Mental Health Awareness Week or Awareness Month. And when I'm talking about advocacy, I'm mostly talking about in terms of general health and mental health, but excuse me, I'm also fighting with pollen and all those lovely postnasal drip things, so forgive me if I sound a little rough. So like I said, I'm primarily talking about healthcare, meaning physical healthcare, medical, mental, but some of these things know that they can apply to other areas as well very easily. In fact, most areas. So what does it mean to be your own best advocate? It means speaking up for yourself instead of relying on others and voicing your opinions rather than letting professionals decide for you. And I'm going to disclaimer this all the way through in a lot of different ways, so just stick with me. Excuse me. Goodness gracious. Mornings are rough with all the pollen. Doing so ensures that your needs are met, which may not be the same as someone else's needs with the same issue. So that's important to remember. Unfortunately, in the medical field, and it's not their fault, in any field, really, when you're talking about large groups of people, maybe just for lack of a better example, tardive dyskinesia, because it was Tardive Dyskinesia Awareness last week. And last night, I attended a local NAMI citrus presentation on tardive dyskinesia. Once treatment plans and things like that are discovered, it is easy to want to cookie cutter everybody into an umbrella type situation and assume that the same thing is going to work for everybody, which is rarely, if ever, the case. So self-advocacy means you are making sure that your needs are met. And those needs may not be the same as somebody else's somebody else that has the same issue as you. No one is going to advocate for you better than you. And self-advocacy raises self in a lot of ways, not just in the health field, raises self-confidence and self-esteem. So I'm a huge Golden Girls fan. I'm probably showing my age, but at night I put the TV on for a little bit at bedtime on a timer. And I usually have Golden Girls on because I've seen all the episodes like 8 billion times. And I can watch it without watching it, if that makes sense. I can close my eyes and I can just listen, and I pretty much know what's happening because I've seen the episodes so many times. And there's one particular episode, and I think it's actually a 2 or 3 part episode, where Dorothy is sick and she knows she's sick, and her roommates and her mother, they all know that she's sick. But she keeps going to these doctors that tell her that it's all in her head. And she keeps pushing and she keeps trying until she finally ends up with a referral to a doctor who actually is up on current research and says, no, I absolutely believe you are sick. We don't have a lot of information about it yet, but there is this disorder called chronic fatigue syndrome, and it sounds like what you have. And she felt so much better just knowing that there was a name and that she wasn't just making this up. And that's just a small example of what self-advocacy can do for you. So how do we do this? How do we go about this? This very, very important thing. Well, for starters, it's important for us to understand our needs, whatever they are, whether we think we're sick right now or not, whether we think we have a condition, be it mental health, be it physical, whatever. It's really important to start by paying attention to our body, our minds, the way we feel, the way we react to certain things, whether it's supplements or medications, and to be aware enough, self-aware enough to know when something has changed for the good or the bad. The more you pay attention to how things affect you, the more you can be aware when something is wrong or when something's going really right. For example, quick example, I'm going to have a lot of stories here today, so I might run a little bit long. I'm going to try not to. But these are important. I take a supplement. I won't get into here what supplement it is, but it's helped me with a lot of things in the past, and I've been taking it for quite some time. And recently, I would say round about October is the time that I can pinpoint. I read an article about a different type of the same supplement that was supposed to be better and more highly absorbed. And I had noticed that I was having a little more trouble with some things that I had originally started taking the supplement for. So I decided to try this other version in the interest of seeing if my body would respond more to that version that was supposed to be much more highly absorbable. And I didn't realize that this was around October, and I didn't realize until recently I had noticed some changes in my body, and not all of them were for the good. And what happens when I start noticing changes in the body or in the way in my emotions or in my mood or anything like that, is I start reflecting back over what I have, and I've talked about this before, what I have or have not been doing in the past few or several weeks. Have I changed something? Am I not following my regular diet? Am I not doing the things that I know work for me? And actually, I kind of found a handful of things that I just have not been sticking to. But one of the things, the light bulb that went on, was that this particular supplement that I had changed was not only not working the way I thought it would, but it wasn't working as well as the original version I was on. So I made a decision last week to go back to the original type of that supplement that I was taking. And I'm a whole new woman this week. There are 3 or 4 key things that had been going on that I had made that change in hopes of helping. But these things had popped up, and I realized it was because I had made the change and it wasn't working for me as well. So paying attention to your body, how you feel, how you react, if there's something that's affecting you differently, is really, really important in understanding your needs, because you cannot self-advocate until you understand what you need, how your body responds, how your mind responds, etc. So self-awareness is super important. Number 2, recognize that you, especially if you are like me and you are paying attention to your body and the things that change and how it reacts, recognize that you are the expert on your own experiences and preferences. This is really important because a lot of us, and I'm not knocking doctors, they go through a lot of schooling. They have to keep up with continuing education. There's a lot there. But the fact of the matter is that there are some fields, especially the counseling field, that are moving more towards a person-centered approach, recognizing that the individual has more experience with themselves, what they need, and what is good and bad for them than anybody else. Sometimes they don't realize, sometimes it has to be drawn out of them, but you are your own best expert. And while doctors are extremely important and they have a lot of knowledge, it is important for you to remember that you know yourself better than anyone. And if you're being honest with yourself, and that's a key here, because if you're not being honest with yourself, if you're just looking for someone to tell you what you want to hear, that's a little bit of a different animal. But if you are your own best expert and you act as such, you will know when something's not quite right. And I'm going to give you an example of that in a little bit here. So the second most important part of self-advocacy is communicating effectively. Another reason that self-advocacy has been on my mind is I was teaching a class for my local NAMI, and one of the class, it was an 8-week class, and one of the classes does discuss things about communication with doctors, with your healthcare team, and kind of how to self-advocate. So on top of studying it, on top of the things going on with people close to me, again, this has been really seriously on my radar. So communicating effectively means speaking the things that you are concerned about, asking questions, and communicating your preferences to your healthcare providers, but also expressing any discomfort, doubts, or uncertainties that you have about treatments, diagnoses, or medication. Because first of all, if you are not fully communicating everything that's going on with you, there are a lot of conditions, mental health or physical health, that have a lot of overlapping symptoms. So if you aren't telling the whole story, you can't get a whole answer. Does that make sense? Also, it is really, really easy. And I drive my daughter nuts sometimes if she has to go to the doctor, which is rare, or my grandson has to go to the doctor. I'm like, what kind of questions are you going to ask? These are the questions I have. And we have iPhones, so I make a note with a list of questions and I share them with her, because it's easy when you get into that doctor's office, whether it's a counselor or a doctor, whatever the field is, it's easy to forget the questions you have. And I'll give you an example of where this applies beyond the medical field. I have an academic counseling appointment today about my academic plan for grad school. I have a laundry list of questions. If I didn't write them down so that I have them ready for this phone call, I would miss something. I can't just assume that getting on the phone and having the conversation is just going to automatically lead to all these questions. And if you're anything like me, without fail, you have walked out of an appointment or a situation where you have been like, oh, I was going to ask this and I can't believe I forgot to ask that. So make a list. Yes, Carla, that's really super important to have a list of concerns or questions for every visit, whatever it is. It could be a doctor appointment. It could be a mental health counseling appointment. This could apply to appointments that have to do with children. This can apply to the legal system, court visits, guardian ad litem, anything like that. Good morning, Miss Kayla. So if you have questions, make sure you write them down. Put a note on your phone. Take a list. And make sure you ask those questions. I can't tell you how many times that I have done this in different types of appointments, meetings, whatever, to make sure that I don't forget anything. Nobody's going to judge you for having a list of questions you want to ask to understand things better. And if they do, they're not the person you should be talking to. That's the end of that story. So communicate your concerns, your questions, your preferences. And express your discomforts, your doubts, or your uncertainties, and explain why, especially when it comes to treatments or medications. And I have a story about that in just a minute. But let's get into the proactive part, and then I'll let you know, and then I'll tell that story. So the next most important thing about self-advocacy is kind of three parts, but they all kind of go together. So be proactive. That's the umbrella here. And under that umbrella is seek information and know your rights. Y'all, I cannot emphasize this enough. And what has saved me on numerous occasions is knowledge is power. I found myself in a situation, again, not medical related. And I'm saying that because I want to give you an example of where medical and mental health, these are the most important fields, but these principles can apply to all areas of your life. I was in a relationship, and I was being gaslit, essentially. I was being blown up with, you're crazy and you don't know, and this is what I was told, and Joe down the street said this, and Tim up the street said that. And it was pushing my buttons, and it was turning into an argument during every conversation. So finally, I went to the horse's mouth on the subject. And this happened 2 or 3 different times. I went to the horse's mouth, or the best resource for knowledge, and I asked the questions. And then I waited until the next time this came up in conversation, and I said, I've been thinking about that. And then I laid out a laundry list of, so I talked to so-and-so, and they work here, and this is what I was told, and so good luck with that. And I just kind of went down the list. Having that knowledge that comes from a reputable source makes it very, very difficult for people who are gaslighting you or trying to make you feel like you don't know what you're talking about. It goes a long way towards shutting them down. So I cannot emphasize enough on any subject, doesn't matter what it is, especially when it comes to self-advocacy, that knowledge is indeed power. Not just having the knowledge, but using it properly. So being proactive means seeking information, and it means arming yourself with knowledge. That starts with taking the time to understand your health, your mental health, concerns, symptoms, and treatment options. So again, that goes back to that body awareness, first of all, if you don't think you have anything going on right now, or if you do. It also means researching about your condition and researching the symptoms and treatment options, paying attention to medications and what the side effects are, even the ones that most rarely occur, because guess what? I had an extreme reaction to my first exposure to a sulfa drug. And some of that stuff wasn't even in the pamphlet. I had to, and I'll explain this again, but I'm going to always disclaimer, use caution with Dr. Google, because depending on how you research, it can be dangerous or it can be helpful. So use caution. But I didn't learn until after I went back to the doctor, who didn't really give me an answer at the time, just basically said that I was taking longer to heal. And then I broke out in a rash the very next day. That was strike 1 for that doctor, I believe. That might have been strike 3. I have a 3-strike policy. Anyway, I digress. It was my research that helped me learn that I had this extreme reaction. And when I found that information, I had every single symptom. Y'all, I literally thought that I had some weird disease and I was going to die because I was having such a weird reaction to this drug. So that means paying attention to the potential hazards of a drug, not to the point where you imagine yourself having it when you don't, but where you can recognize the signs when it comes up. And what the treatment options are, and just taking time to understand it, whether that means asking questions of your healthcare provider, doing a little research from reliable sources, and paying attention to your body. The next thing is to take an active role in your healthcare journey, and this kind of all folds together, and you're going to see what I mean there. Taking an active role in your healthcare journey by asking the questions, seeking second opinions. That's a thing. And it's okay. And advocating for necessary accommodations. So it is totally okay to seek a second opinion. And insurance may actually cover it. I did a little research on this because I was wondering about that. There's a lot of people who they think that whatever the one doctor they just saw says is gospel, and that doesn't matter what their opinion is. They can't seek another opinion, etc. Insurance companies will actually pay for second opinions. There's a list of reasons that I don't have down here, but essentially what it looks like is, Yeah, I can't remember. I'll have to look those up and drop them in the comments for you. But there's a list of basically 4 primary reasons why you should seek a second opinion. One of them is if you're being recommended a non-emergency surgery or something else. I can't remember. But there are times where it's appropriate to ask for a second opinion. When I was first told that I had periodontal disease, I didn't want to believe that because I was so paranoid that I really thought it was just doctors trying to get a bunch of money out of me, dentists trying to get a bunch of money out of me, and I didn't have insurance, or my plan was very loose and very low. So I was afraid, so I seeked a second opinion, of course, again, expecting to be told what I wanted to hear, which was that there was nothing wrong. But that second opinion did in fact confirm that I had periodontal disease, because I had gone so many years without insurance or without seeing a dentist. And it's just, for the record, it's well under control now. But that second opinion made me go, okay, maybe there is something to this. It's not just one dentist office. It's more than one. And eventually I got that taken care of. And by the time I got it taken care of, that dentist basically qualified as a third opinion. But also because I kept pushing it, I actually ended up finding a place that was far less expensive and had a dental plan and office that could help me cover it, and help me afford to get it remedied. So I learned a lot in that process. I wasn't told what I wanted to be told, but I learned a lot in the process. So that's what I mean by using good judgment and being cautious, and not just looking for somebody that's going to tell you what you want to hear. Now, with that said, let me tell you that other story. So this particular doctor, like I said, I have about a 3-strike policy. I'll give somebody the benefit of the doubt the first time. The second time, I'll be like, and then the third time, if I have to push an issue and I'm right and you're wrong, I'm done. That's basically what it boils down to, because it's not that I don't think doctors are smarter than me. I think they are very smart, but I also think sometimes they become complacent and again take a cookie cutter approach to everyone when it doesn't necessarily apply to everyone. So I had a doctor that I saw about my blood pressure. And at the time, I actually had a separate OBGYN, which was unusual because most of my life, it's been the same doctor for everything. And I'll try not to get into too much information, but I'm hoping this story will be helpful for you. I was experiencing a steady increase in blood pressure. And I'd never had blood pressure problems my whole life. Every time I had donated blood or been to the doctor, I didn't have white coat syndrome. My blood pressure was pretty near perfect. It was pretty much a routine 110/70, 108/68, somewhere in that vicinity. Very, very, very extremely normal. Never had blood pressure issues, but I was experiencing situations at work where I was starting to get what I called spectrovision. And it would just make it very difficult to see, maybe a tad of dizziness, and when it would dissipate, I would immediately have a headache. So I felt fairly certain that based on my research that this was probably a blood pressure issue, bought a blood pressure cuff to have at work and started, taking my blood pressure at certain times during the day. And in fact, my blood pressure was increasing. It wasn't ridiculously high, but it was steadily increasing. Well, I had also noticed that every time I went to the doctor, and I had been seeing the OBGYN quite a bit, because we were doing what I call birth control roulette, trying to solve my endometriosis symptoms, that I had been having my blood pressure creep up. So I was kind of putting the two together in my head and suspecting that there was something going on. So when I started having recurring spectrovision is what I called it. I know that's not a technical name. So I don't know if I would walk into your doctor's office using that term. When I started experiencing this more and more frequently, I finally called my doctor and made an appointment. And when I first started seeing him, he had been really good. He would spend time with me. He would listen to what I had to say. But on this particular occasion, he spent about maybe 10 minutes with me. Didn't even make eye contact with me the whole time I was explaining to him that I thought it was my birth control. He kept asking me questions about my work situation. And yes, that was when I had a workplace bully. I was stressed out, but I was no more stressed out than I ever had been. And I've got really, really good stress coping mechanisms. So he kept asking questions about this, and I kept asking about this particular birth control pill I was on. And I've mentioned in the past how I feel, if you haven't caught it in the past, how I felt about being on any kind of pharmaceuticals for my mental health condition because of, the supposed granny gene in my family and the rack of sugar pills / placebos on my granny's door that was so intimidating to me as a child. So he prescribes me a nerve pill. I absolutely did not feel at any point in time during that conversation that he was actually listening to me, except for to the answers that I gave him to the questions that he specifically asked. And I walked out of there with a prescription for a nerve pill, and I was mad. I was upset. And I was not willing to accept that I needed to be on this nerve pill, because by the time I got to him, I really was quite sure that this particular birth control I was on had something to do with it. And I had already done a little research. And I just didn't believe, based on the stressors I had experienced in my life, I was in my early 30s at the time, that the stressors I had experienced in my life, which had been way more tremendous than what I was experiencing at that time, were suddenly causing blood pressure issues, especially when I was a little bit healthier than I'd ever been. So I made a phone call on the way home. I didn't stop at the pharmacist, and I didn't drop off the prescription. I made a phone call. I made a phone call to my OBGYN. And I asked to speak to her, and I explained what was going on and what my suspicion was on. And I asked her to please take a look at my records and see if she could see a pattern of when I had started this particular birth control pill versus when my blood pressure had started creeping up. And she put me on hold, and she came back a few minutes later, and she said, "You know what we're going to do?" She said, "We're going to change your birth control pill. I'm calling you in a new prescription right now." She's like, she said, "I want you to stop taking that one immediately, and I want you to start taking this one." And I think there wasn't necessarily an immediately. I think I had to finish that pack or whatever and wait a week and start the new one. But she wanted me off of that birth control as soon as possible. And guess what happened when I got off of that birth control? I stopped having blood pressure issues almost immediately. So that is an example of where sometimes, if you're not being listened to and the doctor's not paying attention, a second opinion can be very, very helpful. I never did turn in that prescription. What do you call it? I want to say cash it in, but that's not really the right words. I never did turn in that prescription, and I've yet to ever be on a nerve pill, which is what he refers to it at. I don't even know if they're still using that term. In any case, like I said, that was I think that was the third strike for that particular doctor. In any case, it is okay to seek a second opinion. If your gut is telling you that, no, this just isn't right. I also had a doctor that wanted to put me on cholesterol medication because my cholesterol was a little high on my blood work. And we talked about whether or not meals beforehand could affect it and so on and so forth, etc. And I showed him some historical cholesterol results from my blood donations because documentation is really important. And I said, "Can we please wait until my next blood work and let me see if I can bring this back down?" And he said, "Okay." And we did. And I never did go on the cholesterol medication. So again, paying attention, documenting, and not being afraid to ask for a second opinion. If that offends your physician, then you might want to consider a new physician anyway. Because any physician that's truly looking out for you should understand the need or the desire to get a second opinion. But as I've stated before, do not just get a second opinion in hopes that you're going to hear what you want to hear. Had my OBGYN come back to me and said, "No, I really don't see a difference." But see, I knew it was there. I knew in my heart it was there. And my physician wasn't interested in talking to my OBGYN to verify any of that. So who saw me more often than he did. So it is okay to ask for a second opinion. I saw one insurance company that will cover up to 3 per year. Medicare does cover second opinions. There may have to be reasons behind it, but it is okay. Do not be afraid to ask for a second opinion. Okay, moving on, because this is taking longer than I thought. But there's a lot of great information here. So don't wait for problems to escalate before you speak up. Because what happens is you just get angrier and angrier, and you get to the point where you're wasting your time and your doctor's time if you're sitting in the office getting angry at them and not speaking up and not asking questions, and they just continue to dispel information that you don't agree with. And I've talked before about the halo versus horn effect, where once you make up your mind that you don't like somebody or that you're mad at somebody, that all of a sudden everything that they say can be tainted. So the more resentful and the more upset you get and the more things escalate, or physical conditions escalate to the point where they need immediate treatment, when if you'd spoken up 3 or 4 weeks ago, or 3 or 4 months ago, it could have been addressed better and sooner, then all you're going to do is make the problem worse. So make sure that you are addressing concerns as soon as they arise. Now let's talk about that for a minute, because some things have come up lately that have this on my mind. It's important to work within reasonable time frames, okay? Our very technologically advanced society basically means that some people send an email, and if you don't respond right away, then within 15 minutes they're calling you and they're saying, I sent you an email. Did you get it? Why haven't you answered yet? When you're dealing in any kind of situation where you have to self-advocate, it's important to remember doctors' offices, counselors' offices, whatever you're dealing with, whatever the situation is, law offices, legal aid, any of those types of things, they're busy. You're not their only client. You're not their only patient. So as much as there may be times where I want to be in somebody's office going, why aren't you answering me? There's a reasonable time frame that doesn't fit in with today's modern technology. For me, I recommend, and I usually try to wait, even though sometimes I don't want to, and I have to impose that minimum 4-hour wait rule so that I can calm down and react and respond professionally and accordingly. There are reasonable time frames for answers. And I think in the case of a medical situation, you should probably be hearing back from a medical professional or counseling professional. If you email or call and leave a message with concerns, I feel like 2 business days, and I mean 2 business days, and that's roughly 48 hours. But that means if you call at 9 o'clock in the morning on this day and you haven't heard anything by Friday, by 5 o'clock the following day, that's essentially 2 business days, and it's reasonable for you to call back or follow up the next day on day 3. If you're, unless you're in an emergency situation, in which case you might be needing to deal with a different facility altogether, it's really not reasonable to expect a phone call back in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or even an hour or 2. And as much as I may not be the most patient person and want answers right now, really the best way, especially when you're dealing with offices like this, is to recognize that they've got a patient load or a client load or whatever the situation may be, and that 1 to 2 business days is more reasonable than sending an email and then calling 15 minutes later and being like, hey, did you get my email? You haven't answered me yet. What's going on? Why haven't you called me? There's a way to handle these things, and the more reasonable you are in the process of handling these things, then the more weight you can carry if you do have to raise an issue or escalate an issue. And that brings me to the next thing, which is documentation. Documentation is super important in any situation. If I call the cable company and ask them questions about why my bill went up, I'm taking notes. Here's the date. Here's who I talked to. Here's what we talked about. Here's what they said. Documentation is super important. There's a couple of you on this video who have talked to me on many occasions and can attest for how important I think documentation is. In almost any situation, if there's an opportunity to document divorce, counseling, mental health, physical health, anything, if there is an opportunity to document, which means conduct the business by email, if possible, or start the process by email so that you have responses that you can print out, that you can hang on to, that you can refer back to. I'm a huge fan of a paper trail. Good morning, Miss April. Keeping a log, making notes. These are all things that can help you keep on top of the situation, and that in some situations, not necessarily medical related, if you have to refer back to that documentation, sometimes, especially if you've been keeping that documentation for a while, you're just a lot harder to argue with when you have it there in front of you in black and white. And you can say, well, no, on this date at this time, you said this. It can take some time, and it's important to try to keep the emotional out of that documentation, but that is a huge part of self-advocacy. And it's really important, especially when you're trying to address concerns. I've even seen this in the building industry. You're having a problem with the new house you just built, and you can't get the builder to do anything. Document, send emails, not incessantly. Let's not psycho dial or psycho email, which just means doing it over and over again. But send an email, print it out, keep track. How long did it take you to get a response? When they finally called you, what was discussed? Who did you talk to? What time was the call? What day was the call? It seems like a lot of work, but if you just get in the habit of doing it, it's really not that much. And you can always jot down the notes and then flesh it out a little bit more later. But usually when it comes to that kind of documentation, it's best to keep emotion out of it and just state facts. So just the facts, ma'am. Okay, let me move on because I'm definitely running a little over on time. So, again, don't wait for problems to escalate. Document. Ask for second opinions. Where was I at? And allow reasonable time frames for them to get back to you in 15 minutes, an hour, or even sometimes less than a business day, unless it's an emergency situation, is really not an appropriate time frame, no matter what your current technology tells you. Research your condition or mental health issue better to understand symptoms, causes, and available treatments. Again, use caution here with Dr. Google. Make sure you know what you're looking for. Don't just start Googling your symptoms and assume you have every one of 7 diseases that comes up. And I've been there before. I've made that mistake. I won't even get into that story because we're running out of time. But anyway, use caution with Dr. Google. Make sure you know what you're looking for. And if you don't know what you're looking for and you're just Googling symptoms and it's causing massive anxiety and you're starting to get scared and you've convicted yourself to death before you've even seen a doctor, then it's time to step away from the computer. Yes, more doctors make use of portals. And that's a great thing because generally that means everything you need communication-wise or documentation-wise, Carla, that's a great point, is inside those portals most of the time. Recently encountered a situation where there was no information in a portal, and that's created a bit of a problem. But again, use caution with Dr. Google. Depending on how you research and what sources you use, it can either be very helpful or it can be very dangerous. So be a smart researcher whenever possible. And if you're really not sure, Google Scholar's fantastic. You can search for scholarly resources or scholarly articles about a condition or whatever that might help you a little bit more than just random Google links. So as much as I use Google to research, I'm very careful, and I recommend that you do the same. Ask healthcare providers for more information and resources to empower yourself with knowledge. Familiarize yourself with patient rights, mental health laws, and privacy regulations, and remember, those change depending on the state you're in. A lot of them are very similar, a lot of them are the same and they overlap, but not all of them are. So check the laws and the patient's rights for the state you're in. And that's questions you can ask your doctor about, your counselor about. You can get on the Florida Statutes website. There's lots of, if you have a family attorney on retainer, that's also a place you can ask. There are a lot of resources there that are reliable where you can find out about patient rights and health laws and privacy regulations in the state of Florida, if you're in Florida, or whatever state you are in. And understand your right to access your medical records, participate in treatment decisions, and receive quality care. You don't have to just sit there and wait for them to tell you what to do. The more you are proactive and the more you know what to do and you take part in the process, the better you're going to do in general. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to say on this is to seek out resources and assistance programs if you encounter barriers to accessing necessary care. There's going to be barriers all the way around. There might be financial barriers. Sometimes there's organizations that can help. Sometimes there's coupons for medications if you go to the maker's website. You can ask the doctor. Sometimes they can plug you into things. The local oncology institute has a social worker who is a cancer navigator, and she helps people find resources to remove whatever barriers they may have to treatment, which may include finding someone to help them with an electric bill or a house payment, if it means that they may or may not be able to attend their treatment. So there are resources out there, and there are places that you can go to find those resources. So let's talk about that, because the next most important thing, and I'm getting ready to wrap it up here, y'all, thanks for your patience, is to build a support network. Surround yourself with supportive friends, family members, and peers who are going to offer encouragement, offer assistance, not necessarily tell you what to hear if it's not the right thing, and that can also help you advocate for yourself, especially if you're in a situation where you cannot advocate for yourself. I remember when my appendix ruptured and I was so out of it. God help me, if someone hadn't been there with me, Lord knows what would have happened, y'all. Lord knows what would have happened. Because my appendix had been ruptured for 12 to 24 hours by the time the surgeon got in there. And I was completely not coherent. So if someone had not been there with me, someone had not been there with me, I don't know that I would be here talking to you today. So with that said, supportive friends, family members, peers that can offer encouragement, assistance, maybe even go with you if you're nervous about going by yourself. Maybe to help ask the questions or whatever. I have attended teacher meetings with my daughter to ask questions, in case there were questions that she forgot about that the conversation brought up. So it's okay to have a support network. Now, the other way you can find support is to seek out support groups or online communities, where you can connect with others that are facing similar challenges. Where can you do this? No matter where you are, you can go to NAMI.org, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and you can put in your zip code and you can find a NAMI affiliate near you. NAMI also has some online resources, some Zoom classes, and a crisis line. So, and most of your local NAMI affiliates will have crisis lines and resources, local resources as well. So those NAMI websites can be huge, huge help. If you're seeking assistance with some kind of substance abuse, 12-step programs, you can find them. Get on Google, not Dr. Google. Get on Google and search, 12-step programs, support groups near me, AA, Al-Anon, Alateen, any of those. NAMI has support groups for people that are living with mental health conditions and people that are taking care of family members that have mental health conditions. There are dementia support groups. There are grief support groups. Get on Google. If you don't know where to start, get on Google. Get on your local NAMI affiliate website. Get on the NAMI national website. Ask your primary care physician if they have anyone they can refer you to. There's all kinds of support groups and online communities that you can connect with others experiencing similar things and get additional resources. So build that support network. Follow your local NAMI affiliate Facebook page. Follow NAMI's national page. Follow NAMI's state page if you have a state. There's a whole tier process there. There are so many resources out there. Like I said, Google what's near you. See if there's a Facebook page. See if there's a group. I know that there's, I believe, a cancer survivor support group that runs out of that same oncology institute, but don't quote me on that. There's some kind of support group there. They are everywhere if you look. If you're not looking for it, it's just like a red car on the road. If you're not looking for a red car, you're not going to see a red car. If somebody says, did you pass a red car on the way here? On your way home, you're going to see every red car that ever existed. It's what you look for is what you'll find. So finally, and I do need to wrap this up because I am running long today, but I hope you found this helpful. Finally, remember this. You have a right and a responsibility to advocate for your own health and your mental well-being. And by doing so, you can ensure that your voice is heard and that your needs are met. Self-advocacy empowers you to take an active role in your own care, ensures that your needs and preferences are considered, and promotes personalized, patient-centered treatment. So you have more control than you think you do. I promise. Use it wisely. With great power comes great responsibility. So make sure that you are paying attention to yourself, that you're asking the questions, that you're doing the research. And I think that you will find, despite whatever negative experiences you've had in the past with doctors, with counselors, with attorneys, with whatever you're working with, that you will find that the more you arm yourself with knowledge, a living will, end of life paperwork, all of that stuff, that the more you arm yourself with knowledge, and the more you approach things in a respectful and confident manner versus a reactionary, I don't understand this, why are you doing this to me type of mindset, I think that you will find that your health journey, whether it's mental, physical, whatever, and maybe some of your other journeys too, will go that much better. I know it's hard to speak up for yourself sometimes. I promise the first time is the hardest. I promise. So I hope you found this helpful. I'm going to let you go. I know it ran a little long today, but I hope you found this helpful. Remember, there are many areas of life that some of this information can be applied to. I will try to find those 4 times that it's recommended that you seek a second opinion. Drop that in the comments. And if you want to know anything else about what I talked about, shoot me a message if you have a topic you'd like to see me cover in the future. As long as it's not politics or negativity, please shoot me a message. I would be happy to entertain it, research it. I'd love to learn. And in the meantime, get out there and advocate for it yourself. Be well. Have a great day.